Hello, Clements family. Want to give a little introduction for some, maybe some review for others, and then for all of us, just some tips of how to use Classwize. Now, Classwize is our system that we use for monitoring the student Chromebooks while they're working on things in class as we shift more and more into the digital space for our textbooks and for different lessons that we'll be doing using Newsela, Royal Block, whatever those different things are. It's nice to be able to monitor the student um, devices. So we all know we have students who play games, that are watching YouTube, that are doing all kinds of different stuff. And so show you how to deal with some of those things as they come up. And so I'm sure there's also some of you that have you been using it a lot and maybe know even things that I'm not familiar with and I don't know yet. And so you'll be able to, in the form, be able to let me know maybe some tips and tricks that you have as well. But you can access Classwize. You can come in through our class link. And Classwize is right here with the kind of broken up W that's there. And so if you click on that, it's going to open up Classwize for you. Now, the reason I jumped over to tabs is because there's a class that I'm enrolled in that's currently running, and so it would take me into that class. But if you don't have any classes running, it's going to bring you to your home screen here. On my home screen, it's all the different classes that I'm enrolled in. And so before we jump into a class, I'll show you a few things that you can do from this screen. Now, for us, our Classwize updates with Google Classroom every evening at 11:59 p.m. And so we don't want to add classes from Classwize. If you're adding a class, add it from your Google Classroom. Have students enroll in that, or if it's synced with Tyler, they'll automatically enroll in that. And then it will sync every evening from Classwize. Now, if you have a student that you just entered into your Google Classroom, you want to be able to monitor their Chromebook, you can click the sync button. And when I click that, notice it does make it to where you can't use it for a few moments. It takes a little bit for it to sync. And it says any students you have manually added into Google Classroom through Classwize will be lost. So you don't want to ever add students from Classwize. You want to add students in Google Classroom. Again, if your Google Classroom is synced with Tyler, that would be happening automatically. But I know sometimes you may get a new student in that hasn't synced with Tyler yet. And so you can add them into your classroom and then sync it with Classwize, but you don't want to do it the other way around. Um, and so it says if these students regularly attend your class, we recommend adding them through Google Classroom instead. And so if it were a case where, for whatever reason, you just had an extra student that day, maybe there's a student on quarantine and you added them to that particular class for that day, you could do it to Google Classroom, but I don't see that really being something we would be doing very often, if at all. And so we could sync from there. You don't want to add any classes to from Classwize, especially since most of the things I think we'll be using all the time. I'm going to scroll down. This is my test classroom that I have set up in Google Classroom. I'll show you a couple of things you can do before you enter the class. If I click on the cog or the gear that's right here, here's where I could add students. Again, you want to add students from Google Classroom, not from Classwize. Same with teachers. If you had maybe a para that was with you for the day or a teacher that was with you for the day, you could add them in right here. If you have a teacher who's working with you every day, again, add them in Google Classroom and then it'll sync. And because anytime you sync these, it's going to get overridden and it's going to kick them out if you do it from this end. So you want to do most everything from Google Classroom. Then you can go to scheduling. Now, scheduling is something our ninth grade teachers may want to use. It's not going to work for our eighth grade teachers. And here's why. When I click to add schedule, notice it's adding that every Thursday between these times, that's when this class is going to be. So for our ninth grade teachers, you could come in and say, all right, every Monday from 7:40 to 9:15 because it goes in 15-minute intervals, or maybe you want to do 9:10 to let out a little bit early. So I'll say from 9:10 that I'm going to have my first period class during that time. And then, and so that's going to be set up. That class is going to run every Monday at that time. And then I could come in and I could say, all right, I also want Tuesdays, and I could set my time 7:40 to 9:10, and it'll run every Tuesday. And so this would work for our ninth grade teachers who have the same classes every day at the same time for the semester. It will not work for our eighth grade teachers who are on A day, B days, because there's no way for it to tell it that I want this every even day of the month, or that I wanted every other Monday and then another class on the opposite Mondays. And so you won't be able to add schedules. I prefer not adding the schedule anyway, but I'll show you why in just a moment. And then you've got the invite code, which I don't know that you would need to use for anything that we're doing. And so that's why ninth grade teachers maybe use the cog. If you have a para who's just with you for the day, or someone that you know that teacher is maybe covering for you for a class, you could add them in that way. But otherwise, you're going to sync everything through Google Classroom. The main way that I would typically do this is at the start of my class, and this is what for eighth grade, this is what you'll have to do. All right, and so if I'm beginning my class now, I'm going to click Start Class, and it comes up and asks me the session will end at, and I can pick what time I want this session to end. And so if I said, all right, I want this session to end at 11:30. Now you want to make sure that you don't pick a time that goes past the time your class meets. And so maybe 11 a.m. If it goes into the next block or into that another teacher's class, any rules that you've set up for your class is going to carry over with those students into their next classes. And so maybe you've set up a rule where you don't ever want them to be able to go to YouTube in your class. And you come in and you just say, all right, well, I'm just going to set all of my times to be the end of the day. What happens is now that student goes to another class and they're still under your rules and they cannot access YouTube. And that teacher may be using YouTube as a part of their lesson for that day for the students to go and watch a video and write a response to that video. And so when you start a class, have your end time be maybe a few minutes before that class ends. It is only in 5-minute intervals. And so I always picked a little bit before the class end just to make sure it didn't carry over into another teacher's time. But I can pick that time, click start, and it's going to bring up my class. All right. And so I can see right here that I already have a student who's watching ESPN. All right. And so that's right here on the screen. It shows me. So I have this student. It says waiting for student activity. Maybe that student's not here this day in class, and so they don't have their Chromebook. They just haven't gotten their Chromebook out and going yet. Whatever it may be, you have a student who you know is in class on a computer, and it is not pulling up this information. You want to make sure that student is using a school-issued Chromebook and not a personal one. And so, as far as I know, these will not work on personal computers. It has to be on the school ones. Right? But we'll use this student right here as an example and show you some of the things that you can do. Well, I can see right now that this student has a couple of different tabs open. One, if I pull up their screen, I can see, okay, they're classroom. So they're in classroom. So they came into class, they got onto classroom, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing there. Maybe I had an assignment in Discovery Education, and so they clicked on the link and they are in Discovery Education right there. Okay, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. But then when I click on these others and I see, all right, they're on YouTube, and maybe I had an assignment that was for YouTube, but what they're looking at is they're looking at some anime, not the assignment that they were given to look at. And then they're looking at the NFL teams. If I want to see what they're looking at currently, and I click on this follow active tab, then you notice it popped up and it told me what the active tab is, and it'll automatically follow that tab on this screen. And so maybe I could see, all right, they had a YouTube on, but I'm watching them and they're never clicking on that YouTube. It's just kind of in the background. They had it for later. Then you can kind of decide, do I want to close that or keep it open? If I'm watching it and I can see that they are on YouTube and they are scrolling around on here, they're clicking different things, they're looking at different things. Well, then I have the option to come up here and I can close that tab on their computer. All right, ESPN. I see they're looking at that. They're not really paying attention to what they're supposed to be doing. I can close that. Notice it comes up here and it says, looking at their screen, a tab was closed by your teacher. So they're going to know that you did it. Maybe they're not focused in and I want them to go to Newsella. So I could click on that open site button. They're supposed to be at Newsella. That's where I want them to go. And it's going to open up Newsella on their computer. And so I could tell them, hey, give them a little reminder. This is where you're supposed to be using this open site button that's right up here. And then if I wanted to send them a chat, it says chats are disabled for this class. So I'll have to show you how to set up chats and then we can use that. But I could use that chat button to be able to send them a message. It'll come across as a black bar at the top of their screen. I could also come down here and create a rule and say, all right, during class sessions, block for all students. So in this case, it's blocking Newsella. If that student was still on ESPN, and so I see that student goes back and they are going back to ESPN, even though I closed it. They're going to go back on there and they're going to start watching their video again that they want it to watch. That I could come down here and say, all right, create rule during class sessions for all students in the class, and it's going to block ESPN, or I could block it just for that student. Now it's blocked ESPN. They can no longer use that. And so all of that I can get to just by clicking on whatever it is and kind of watch what a student is doing. In this view, I'm seeing what all the different students are doing. Now, if I want to be able to chat with students, I can come up here to this chat button that's at the top right-hand corner of the screen and enable chat. Now, chat does not allow students to chat with one another. It allows students to chat with you and for you to chat with students, but they cannot chat with each other in this. All right, and so now if I come over to my Clements student and I click chat, it's going to give me the option to be able to have a little chat with them over here on the side. And so I can send them a message. It's going to come across the top of their screen and let them know. I can also do that from here, create a chat. I could say, stay focused and get to work on the assignment. Send them a message and it's going to show up for them on their screen there for them to be able to see. And so those are just a few little things you can do from here. Another thing you can do just from this kind of main menu of your class, you can open a site for that student. So you could open a site right there that you want them to go to. You can also pause the internet. Now, I'm going to tell you to use that with caution. When you click that pause the internet, it can apply to all students, or you could select specific students you want it to pause for. If you pause the internet, it is going to shut down all tabs that they have open. And so if they're using a Google form and you pause their internet, that Google form is not going to save. And so this might be kind of a last resort. You've given several warnings. They continue to do stuff on their Chromebook that they're not supposed to be doing. Maybe you've told them to get off their Chromebook and they won't get off the Chromebook. Whatever it is, you could pause their internet, but maybe warn them, hey, you need to submit any forms, anything that you need to work on, because I'm getting ready to pause your internet for this class. You can also just jump from um, slide to slide or tab to tab that they're on. You can close their tabs from this bigger view and kind of knock those off. So you don't necessarily have to go into their individual screen for that. If you notice up here, it says that I have one rule. And so I've blocked ESPN for that student. Now, because I have my session ending, that rule will end when my session ends, when my class ends. So if I've blocked a site, maybe they're in PE for the health and PE for their next class, and they're using ESPN to do some research on a specific game or football player or whatever it may be. And they may need to go to ESPN. And so it'll automatically end this rule when your class session ends. But maybe you said, look, we've done some work. There's a few minutes left over at the end of the day during bus duty or whatever. And the kid's saying, hey, can I get back on ESPN? You could come in and delete your rules and delete them manually as well. And now that student's able to go in that way. So you can also come up to class tools, and there's a few things that you can do through class tools. You can open a site, and so this is if you want every student to get this same site opened. And so maybe you want every student to go to Newsela. You could go in and I want every student to go to Newsela, open the site, and it's going to open it for every student in the class. You could also make an announcement to the whole class. And so read the Newsela article and write a short response in complete sentences. You send that, and that message is going to go to every student in a little black bar across the top of their screen. And so in the individual boxes, you could send a chat to an individual student. You can open a site for an individual student, but if you want to do it for everybody at the same time, you can come up here to your class tools, open site, make an announcement. In focus, maybe I only want students to be able to go to Newsela. And so I could click on focus to Newsela, start focus. Now this is the only place they're going to be able to go. And so they won't be able to navigate away from the Newsela website. You see it has a little target up here that says class is focused. I can come down and end focus, and we could go on with other parts of our lesson. You also have pause internet. The same thing applies to when you're pausing it for the class. Probably not one you're going to want to use, even though on the surface it makes sense, but it will close any tab for that. So if they have a tab open from another class of a form that they need to finish filling out, it will close that form, and they will not be able to get that information back. Modify students, you're not going to use because you're going to do everything through Classroom and just allow it to sync. You also have your chat where you have every student you're chatting with can be in here. And so you could have that up and see all the different chats that you sent for a class. Remember, you do need to open this up and enable chat for the classroom to be able to send chats directly to students. And if I have that off and I try to send a chat, it comes up and tells me chat is disabled for this class. And so if that happens, just come up to the upper right hand corner where it says chat, enable it, and now you have it there. Your rules, you could create a rule for the class. And so if you want to block a certain website, and so it gives you some options. This rule controls whatever these websites, whatever you want to block. And so, maybe you want to block Amazon, and so you could block it. And who does it apply to? Oh, it applies to the whole class. Or if I unclick that, I could go in and apply that to specific students. Of course, if there's a website I want to specifically allow and only allow, I could do that. And you could create those rules for your students. If you're ending a class, or if you thought you were going to get done at a certain time and you don't, you can always come up here and you can change your times for the class, or say I want to go ahead and end. I want to end all my rules. I'm going to end now. That ends that class. So as I said, ninth grade teachers, you can schedule classes, but our eighth grade teachers, that's not going to work for you to be able to schedule when these classes take place. You're going to have to go in each day, start the class, pull that up, and monitor it. Now, there's always students who, like we've all experienced, where they're going to be using their Chromebook for things that they shouldn't be. They're going to be focused on that. And so while you're giving instruction, I'd encourage a couple of things. One, learn a few things to be on the lookout for. If a student's only using arrow keys and spacebar, they're probably not doing your assignment. They're probably playing a game. If they're super zoned into their Chromebook while you're giving instruction, maybe you're doing something where they're taking notes on their Chromebook and while you're giving instruction. But if they're really, really zoned in, I'd say chances are it's not because of the lesson. It's because they're zoned into something else. And so kind of learn to pick up on those things. You'll gain that as you work with students on the Chromebooks more and more. And then I know, because it's hard to use Classwize while you're trying to give instruction at the same time, but you could really use this when you then give them something to work on their Chromebook, and then you can kind of use this to monitor and engage with them. You can kind of see what they're doing, how they're doing in that, send them messages, give them comments. Of course, if you're using Google Docs in Classroom, you can jump into that doc with them and see what they're typing, how they're doing, engage with them through Classwize. A lot of ways to use it as engagement. All of us have at times done things where we give them an assignment and then we're grading. We're not really paying attention to what they're doing, but we know we're going to be more effective if we're engaged with them, kind of paying attention to what's going on. This gives us a way to do that that doesn't require us to be constantly in the back of the room or watching all their computers or whatever it may be. And so it gives us an opportunity to be a little bit more diligent, monitoring what students are doing and helping them focus and stay on task. At the end of this video, if you'll fill out the form, let me know any other questions that you have. If you have tips or tricks that you've learned with Classwize, feel free to add those as well, and I could get those out to teachers. But I hope this was helpful and resourceful for you in being able to monitor your classes using Classwize.